Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. He stood there frozen, his eyes locked with mine, and in those few seconds, everything around me seemed to disappear. The walls, the furniture, the ticking clock on the wall. It all just faded into silence. He had seen everything, not just what happened, but who I had become and the look on his face. God. I wish I could forget it, but I can't because it wasn't anger, it wasn't even shock, it was disappointment, and that's what broke me. I know what you might be thinking. How does someone end up here? How does a woman like me, a mother, a wife, someone who once believed in doing the right thing, get to the point where this becomes her truth? But the thing is, it didn't start that night. It started long before, with silence, with small moments of being ignored. With nights I cried quietly, so no one would hear me, with the slow, aching kind of loneliness that builds over time until you're no longer sure if you're even alive or just existing. And then one day someone looks at you, really looks at you, and you feel seen again. I didn't go looking for it, I didn't plan for it, but life doesn't always wait for your permission. Does it? Sometimes it just happens, like a match dropped in dry grass. And by the time you see the flames, it's already too late. That night when he walked in and saw me say us, his face was pale, his hands were trembling, and I felt like the air had been punched out of my C********T, like my heart dropped straight into the floor because suddenly the fantasy was gone and all that was left was the truth, the messy, painful, ugly truth. And I'm not here to make excuses. I'm not here to paint myself as the victim. I just want to tell you the whole story because I think maybe someone out there needs to hear it, someone who's been smiling through the pain, someone who's felt invisible in their own home, someone who knows what it's like to crave just one moment of feeling wanted again. If that's you, then please keep listening. If you've ever had a moment you wish you could erase, but couldn't, you'll want to hear this because some truths, no matter how painful, have to be spoken out loud. And if you believe these stories matter, if you believe the human heart is worth unraveling, then subscribe to Forbidden Desires. Because here we don't judge. We just tell the truth, no matter how messy it gets. Now let me take you back to where it all began. When Oliver moved in. I thought it would bring some life back into this house, but I never expected what followed. The house had grown so quiet over the years, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the heavy kind, the kind where even footsteps feel like echoes, where you start whispering even when you're alone because raising your voice feels like a disruption in a place already on the verge of falling apart. My husband and I, we didn't fight, we didn't scream, we just stopped talking, stopped noticing, stopped caring. He was always away. Work meetings, trips that kept getting longer. And even when he was home, he wasn't home. He'd sit at the table scrolling his phone. I'd sit across from him pretending not to care, three strangers, sharing space, not life. Sometimes I'd catch myself wearing that old perfume. He once loved cooking his favorite meal, asking about his day, and he'd nod, give a faint smile, and go back to his screen. It wasn't hate. It was indifference, and that somehow hurt more. I was 38, but I felt 60, not in body but in spirit, faded unseen. Then came Oliver. He was polite, quiet, always respectful, didn't say much those first few days, just unpacked his things, set up in the guest room, and stayed out of the way. I remember the first morning I made breakfast. After he arrived, I placed a plate in front of him and he looked up and said, "Thanks, it smells really good." That's all he said, but it caught me off guard. 'Cause it had been so long since anyone had thanked me for something simple. So long since anyone had looked me in the eye with genuine kindness. I smiled and something stirred inside me. I brushed it off. Of course, he's just being nice. I told myself don't be ridiculous, but that feeling, it didn't go away. He wasn't like most teenage boys. He was thoughtful, helpful, always offering to carry the groceries or sweep the porch or walk the dog when it rained, and he noticed things. Little things like when I changed my hair or when I looked tired or when I cooked something new. He'd say, "You all right?" or "This is different, but it's good," and those words, simple, honest words, felt like sunlight through a cracked window, unexpected, warm, dangerous. It had been so long since anyone saw me, not the mother, not the wife, me. I didn't realize how starved I was for attention, not praise, not flattery, just moment. Oliver brought energy into the house. Not in a loud, disruptive way, but in a gentle, calm way that filled the silence. He'd hum when he did the dishes, talk to the dog like it was a person, offer to pick up things from the store before I asked, and I started looking forward to seeing him, noticing when he walked into the room, noticing how he smiled, noticing how I smiled back. That scared me because I knew it wasn't right. But I also knew I hadn't felt this alive in years. It started slowly, like a soft breeze before a storm. But even then, I think part of me knew this wasn't just a phase. This wasn't just gratitude. This was something else, and the worst part, I didn't want to stop it even before anything happened. Even before a single line was crossed. I had already crossed a 99 in my mind, and every time I reminded myself of who he was, that he was my husband's son, that he was still just a boy figuring out life, I'd feel a wave of guilt wash over me. But the next moment I'd catch him watching me from across the room, not with judgment, not with confusion, but with a quiet knowing, and I'd feel that ache again. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just imagining it, that I was lonely, that nothing would ever happen. But even then, somewhere deep down, I think I knew something already had, and that truth was both terrifying and impossible to walk away from. It was late, sometime past midnight, the kind of quiet that only lives in the middle of the night when the world feels asleep and everything feels heavier. Somehow I had tossed and turned for hours the way I usually did when my husband was out of town. The bed always felt colder when he was gone, not just physically but emotionally. I got up wrapped, my robe around me, tiptoed through the hallway like I was sneaking through someone else's home, just wanted a glass of water. Kitchen light was off. Only the soft glow from the streetlight outside filtered through the window, cast long, quiet shadows across the counter. I didn't hear anyone, not until I turned around, and there he was, Oliver, standing at the edge of the hallway, barefoot, shirtless, half in shadow. He froze for a second, just like I did. His eyes dropped, then quickly darted away, not in disgust, not in panic, just awareness, a beat too long, a second too heavy. Neither of us said a word. He mumbled something like "didn't mean to scare you," and turned away. I stood there with my hand gripping the glass, heart racing, not because of what he did, but because of what I felt. I told myself it was the hour, the stillness, the surprise of being seen in that robe, something I hadn't thought twice about wearing before. But deep down I knew that moment changed something, not outwardly, not immediately, but inside something shifted the next day. He was different, not awkward, not tense, just softer. He offered to help make dinner. He made small talk, asked me what I liked to read, laughed at a silly story I told about his dad from years ago, the kind of laugh that makes you feel interesting. At one point, as I passed him a bowl, he looked at me and said, "You look really nice today," just that, no smirk, no ulterior tone, simple, straightforward, sincere. And my heart skipped. Not because it was romantic, but because it was human, and because no one had said anything like that to me in years. I smiled, brushing it off with a casual thanks, but inside something flickered like a light I'd forgotten was there that night. I stood at the bathroom mirror, washing my face, and I looked at myself differently, not through my husband's eyes, dull, tired, predictable, but through Oliver's new, curious present. And I hated myself for letting that mean anything, for letting that one sentence stay with me for hours, for wondering if he meant it. But I also didn't. 'Cause it made me feel alive, not guilty, alive. The days that followed were filled with more of those moments, tiny, quiet things. He'd fix the window latch. I mentioned in passing. He'd bring in the mail before I had to ask. He'd smile a little longer when we locked eyes, and I told myself again and again, he's just being kind. He's just thoughtful. Don't make it into something. It's not. But every time he brushed past me in the kitchen, every time his hand lingered for a beat when passing the salt, every time I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, I felt it, that tension, that electricity, that dangerous, unspeakable pull. And no matter how many times I told myself to stop, to redirect, to detach, to be the adult, my heart didn't listen. It had been asleep for so long, and now it was wide awake, and all it took was one glance. One compliment. It was just a compliment, but it lit something in me I didn't know was still there. I couldn't stop thinking about it, that compliment, that glance that night in the kitchen, and not just because of what he said, but because of how it made me feel desirable, not for being someone's wife, not for being the cook or the cleaner or the planner of the family calendar, but just for existing. I tried to shake it off, but the truth is, it made me realize something I hadn't wanted to admit. I couldn't remember the last time I felt wanted, not noticed, not acknowledged wanted. When did I stop being someone's first thought in the morning? When did his hands stop reaching for mine under the covers? When did my voice become something he tuned out instead of leaned into? I thought back to the early days, late-night drives, inside jokes, the way he used to text me just to say I miss you. And now I'd send him a message and get nothing for hours, sometimes just a thumbs up, other times silence. He used to plan weekends away. Now he couldn't remember what I liked in my coffee, and every time I tried, every time I made the effort to dress up or cook something special or ask him how work was, he'd glance at me like I was interrupting a more important thought. I didn't realize how much that chipped away at me, how it hollowed me out slowly, quietly, without a single fight or dramatic moment, just distance. And then there was Oliver. He didn't flirt. He didn't make advances, but he noticed things. He asked if I was okay. When I looked tired, he complimented the way I arranged the living room. After I cleaned it, he offered to help with dinner. Even after long days, he listened, really listened, and when he laughed at something, I said it wasn't forced. It wasn't polite. It was real. I caught myself lingering in conversations with him, not because I was trying to make anything happen, but because it felt good to be heard. Then the guilt would slam into me. Hard, sharp, relentless. "This is your husband's son." I whispered to myself, "What is wrong with you?" I'd avoid him. The next day, take longer showers, pretend to scroll my phone on the couch just to create space. But somehow he'd still end up near me asking if I wanted tea, telling me about his classes, laughing at a story he'd read online, and there I was laughing back, looking forward to his presence, wearing lipstick I hadn't touched in years. Every time I felt that flutter in my C*******T, I tried to bury it, push it deep down where no one could see. But feelings aren't obedient. They don't follow rules, they don't care about titles or roles or what's appropriate. They grow in silence, they feed on attention, and they thrive in the shadows of loneliness. At night I'd lie awake beside my husband, listening to the sound of him breathing, turned away from me, feeling a stranger beside me, while a boy down the hall unknowingly held more of my heart than I was willing to admit. I wanted to run from it. To deny it, to scream at myself for being so weak, so foolish, so selfish. But at the same time, there was a part of me that didn't want it to stop because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something, anything, and I was terrified of what that meant. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just lonely, but my heart, it wouldn't stop racing. Started to happen more often. Oliver staying up later, just like me. At first it felt innocent to people who couldn't sleep, sharing space. He'd linger in the kitchen a little longer after dinner. I'd make tea and ask if he wanted some just to have a reason to speak. Conversations started, short weather news. His classes, but over time they got deeper. He told me things he hadn't told anyone else, about his mom remarrying too fast, about how out of place he felt here, sometimes about how hard it was pretending everything was fine, and somehow it mirrored exactly what I was feeling, like we were both floating. Living in a house that didn't feel like home, I found comfort. In his words, he found safety in mine, and somewhere along the way those late-night talks turned into a thread we both started clinging to. Then one evening the sky broke open. Rain like I hadn't heard in months, thunder that shook the windows, the kind of storm that felt like it wanted to wash everything clean. And then the power went out. I lit candles. He brought the ones from the hall closet, and we sat at the dining table, faces glowing in soft flickers of gold. The rain drummed steady against the windows. Our shadows danced on the walls. We didn't talk much that night. There wasn't a need to. The silence felt full, heavy, charged. At one point I reached to slide my mug closer and my fingers brushed his. It was nothing, barely a second, but my entire body stiffened and he didn't move. He didn't flinch, he just looked up, eyes searching mine. Quiet. Still, the moment stretched longer than it should have. Longer than it had any right to, and in that space that breathless can it pause something almost happened almost, but I pulled away, mumbled something about needing more tea, left the room faster than I meant to. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it from the kitchen because it wasn't what happened that night. It was what almost happened, and that scared me more the next morning. I was a different person, overly cheerful, too loud, too bubbly. I made pancakes, something I hadn't done in months, kept asking him if he wanted more, kept finding things to do in the kitchen so I didn't have to sit with him. Oliver fairly spoke, but he watched me quietly, intensely, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, in a way that made me feel seen again. And I hated how much I noticed it, how I felt his eyes on me before I even looked, how I turned my back just to catch my breath, how his silence started speaking louder than his words. That day I told myself it was a one-time thing, that nothing had happened, that I had imagined it all. But the thing about pretending is that your body doesn't always play along, because every time I walked past him I felt that invisible thread pulling us back into that candlelit moment. And every time our eyes met it was like we were both asking a question we weren't allowed to say out loud. I started avoiding him, leaving rooms when he entered, folding laundry that didn't need folding, spending more time out of the house than I needed to. But it didn't help, because avoidance doesn't erase feelings. It only makes them louder in the spaces where no one's watching. And at night when I lay beside my husband staring at the ceiling, heart heavy with things I couldn't say, I found myself thinking about candlelight, about brushed hands, about the version of myself that was still alive in someone else's gaze. It wasn't what happened that night. It was what almost happened. And that scared me more. My husband left that Friday morning, another conference, another hotel, another weekend alone. He kissed my cheek barely and reminded Oliver to take out the trash. Then he was gone. The house always felt different when he wasn't there, lighter in a way that made me feel guilty, but also heavier because I knew what I was trying to ignore, what I was too afraid to admit. Oliver and I didn't speak much that morning, just polite exchanges, coffee, breakfast, the weather. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said. By Saturday afternoon, I was restless, pacing, cleaning rooms that were already spotless, pretending not to notice how often. Oliver walked past the doorway, pretending not to glance when he took off his hoodie and stretched in the living room. The tension hung in the air like humidity, thick, sticky, unshakable. That night I poured a glass of wine. Then another, told myself it was just to unwind. I asked Oliver if he wanted to watch something. He said, yes, simple, quiet, too casual to be innocent. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, a movie neither of us really watched, flickered across the screen. And the silence stretched. Tension thickened. I sipped slowly. He said something about the movie. I laughed, he smiled, our eyes met, it felt like time paused. And then I got up too quickly, mumbling something about dishes. I needed its face breath away to stop this shaking in my hands. I ran the water, stared at the bubbles forming in the sink. Then I heard him behind me. Oliver, he didn't say anything, just walked up and started drying a plate, and we stood there side by side in that quiet kitchen, so close, the warmth of him brushing just barely against my arm. I moved to step away, but the floor was wet, my foot slipped, and suddenly his hands were on my waist, studying me, holding me, touching me. I froze, so did he. His hands lingered too long, his breath near my neck, and I turned slowly, our faces inches apart and our eyes locked. It was all there. The fear, the ache, the desire we hadn't dared to name. He didn't move and too didn't want to. But I knew I had to. So I stepped back, fairly, heart pounding, but he didn't. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting for me to say something, anything. And then he froze. His eyes shifted past me over my shoulder, went wide. His lips parted like he wanted to speak but couldn't. And then I heard it. That creak, that soft, slow creak of the staircase behind us, and every nerve in my body went cold. I turned slowly, as if dragging my soul with me, and standing there on the third step from the bottom half, shadowed in the hallway light, was my stepson, but not Oliver, the other one, the younger one, still in his pajamas, still clutching a glass of water, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open, confused, silent. He didn't speak, didn't run, just stood there, and in that moment it felt like the whole house was holding its breath. Time didn't slow down, it stopped. I couldn't move. Oliver couldn't speak. And that boy, that sweet, quiet boy, had seen everything, not a kiss. Not a touch that crossed a line. But he saw something. He saw us. He saw what wasn't supposed to be there. What even I had been pretending didn't exist. My heart felt like it shattered into a 99 sharp pieces, cutting through every excuse I had told myself. And in his eyes I saw the truth. I saw what we looked like from the outside, what I had become. Then I heard the creak of the staircase, and when I turned around, my stepson was standing there, but not Oliver, the other one. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at us, frozen, confused. And then he ran his feet, pounded up the stairs so fast I barely had time to react. The sound of his door slamming echoed like thunder in my C*******T. I turned to Oliver, his face, pale eyes, wide hands still shaking from where they'd held my waist. We didn't speak. What could we even say? I moved first, ran after him, my robe brushing against the floor, my breath catching in my throat. I knocked on his door lightly at first. Then harder. Hey, sweetheart, it's okay, please, can we talk? No answer. Listen to me. It wasn't just open the door. Please, still nothing. I could hear rustling behind it, a muffled sob. Or maybe it was just the sound of my own guilt echoing back at me. I stood there for what felt like hours, hands trembling, head against the door, heart beating so hard I thought I might faint. I whispered, "Please don't tell your dad. It's not what you think. Please don't tell him I hated myself." The second the words left my mouth, because I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting me. Eventually I walked away, back down the stairs, back into that kitchen that now felt like a crime scene. Oliver hadn't moved. He stood by the counter, staring blankly at the sink. His jaw clenched, his eyes unfocused. I wanted to speak, to ask what we were going to do to figure it out together. But he just turned and walked out up the stairs into his room. Door closed, and just like that, I was alone again. Not the slow kind of loneliness I'd grown used to over the years, but a sharp, jagged kind, the kind that cuts through your C******T and sits behind your ribs. The next morning, the house was silent, too silent. I made breakfast out of habit, mostly pancakes, bacon, orange juice. No one came down. Eventually, I knocked on Oliver's door. No answer. The younger one still locked. I sat at the table, staring at the food, going cold, listening to the tick of the kitchen clock and trying not to fall apart. Hours passed when Oliver finally came down. He didn't look at me, didn't say good morning, didn't even glance in my direction. He grabbed a bottle of water, opened the fridge, closed it again, then turned to leave Oliver. I said barely above a whisper, "Can we please talk?" He paused just for a second, then shook his head slowly, almost like he was disappointed, not in me but in us and himself. Then he walked away. The younger one stayed in his room all day. Didn't come down for lunch or dinner. I knocked again. No response. When I peeked through the crack of the door that evening, he was lying on the bed, back to the door, headphones in. I left a plate outside for him. He never touched it. That night I sat in the living room alone, the TV on, but I wasn't watching, just staring at the light, flickering across the walls, the same walls that had watched me fall apart. I kept thinking of his eyes, of what he saw, of what he thought he saw. I kept wondering, would he tell, would he carry this with him forever? Would he ever look at me the same way again? The guilt didn't come in waves. It flooded me, and the worst part, it wasn't even over anything done. It was over. Everything felt, everything wanted, everything almost allowed. I tried to act normal, but everything was broken. Oliver wouldn't talk. His brother wouldn't even eat dinner. I stood in front of the mirror the next morning. The sunlight creeping through the blinds cast lines across my face. Lines I hadn't noticed before, not just age, but where worry, regret, and as I stared at my own reflection, I didn't see the woman I used to be. I didn't see the wife or the mother figure or the dependable one who always held the house together. I saw someone I didn't quite recognize, not a monster but not innocent either. I whispered to myself, "What did you do?" And no answer came. Just silence, just that tight gnawing feeling in my C*******T that wouldn't let go. I replayed it all over and over: the kitchen. The look in Oliver's eyes, the creak of the stairs, the younger one's face, that fragile, stunned expression, that moment when childhood innocence collided with adult failure. I wanted to scream, to take it all back, to rewind time and pull myself out of that kitchen, to make myself forget how good it felt to be seen. But I couldn't, because the truth was already here, in the walls, in the silence, in the broken pieces no one was picking up. I thought about my husband, about calling him, telling him everything, laying it all bare: the distance, the ache, the almost, but the words stayed stuck in my throat because I knew if I did, it would all be over. Not just the marriage, but the home, the kids, the fragile routine we were all pretending wasn't crumbling, and deep down, maybe selfishly, I wasn't ready to lose it all. So I asked myself, did I really cross a line? Or did I just finally feel something as emotional? Betrayal, still betrayal, even if no lips touched, even if no promises were broken aloud, because if it is, then I'm guilty not of the act, but of the wanting, of the longing, of the willingness to go there if only the moment had gone further. And the scariest part, there's still a part of me that doesn't regret it. A small, quiet part that still feels alive in that memory, but that part is now buried under fear, not fear of being caught, but fear of being exposed to myself, to that boy upstairs, to the man I still wear a ring for. Every moment after that night was shadowed by dread. What if the younger one tells him? What if he says something he doesn't understand? What if he does understand and chooses silence as punishment? The guilt never left. It followed me everywhere, in the clink of dishes, in the quiet footsteps, overhead, in the unopened messages from my husband saying, "Flight got delayed. Be home Monday." Monday. As if everything would be fine by then, as if time could clean the blood off a wound that hadn't even stopped bleeding. I considered leaving, packing a bag, disappearing for a day or 3 just to breathe. But I couldn't, because leaving would raise questions, and questions would lead to truth, and the truth. It was too ugly, too fragile, too dangerous to say out loud. So I stayed, sat in the living room, listened to the rain, hit the windows again, and wondered if a heart can betray someone, even without touching them. Then what am I, a liar? A cheater, a woman just desperate to feel something again? I stood in front of the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. I wasn't a monster, but I wasn't innocent either. He saw everything, and his silence since then says more than words ever could. He hasn't looked me in the eye, hasn't spoken to me, not even a glance, just silence, and it's loud, louder than any confrontation, louder than any accusation, because silence means he's holding it and carrying it, maybe be confused, maybe be ashamed, or maybe just broken in a way he doesn't have the words for. I don't know what he'll do. I don't know if he'll tell. I don't even know what he thinks he saw. All I know is that I saw myself through his eyes, and it shook me. Keep wondering, am I a terrible person, or just a woman who reached for something she shouldn't have because she was drowning, because she felt invisible? Because she forgot what it felt like to be alive inside her own skin. I never meant to hurt anyone, but maybe the worst kind of hurt is the one you never intend, the one that sneaks in when your guard is down and your heart is too hungry to care. And maybe that's the most human kind of mistake there is. Please tell me in the comments, was this betrayal or just a moment of broken connection between broken people? Was it a line crossed or a cry for help that should have come sooner? And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, if you believe that the heart isn't black and white but made of cracks and shadows and longing, then please like this video, subscribe to Forbidden Desires, because here we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart sometimes. The worst punishment is not being hated. It's being seen exactly as you are, in a moment you wish had never happened. No filter, no excuses. No room to twist the truth into something more forgivable, just raw exposure. That's what it felt like when his eyes met mine that night, when innocence collided with my shame. It didn't matter that I hadn't acted on anything. Didn't matter that I stepped away before anything happened, because intentions, they leave fingerprints even on moments that never fully unfold. I keep replaying it the way I used to justify everything to myself, saying I was just lonely, saying it wasn't real, saying it would never go anywhere. But loneliness is a liar. It tells you you're starving, even when what you're really missing is yourself and silence. Silence is a killer. It doesn't shout, it doesn't warn, it waits, it builds, and it fills every empty space until you can't breathe, until one small moment. One misstep feels like oxygen, and by then it's too late. You already crossed a line. Even if your feet never moved, I learned something I wish I hadn't. That betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it happens in whispers, in glances, in what's felt but never spoken. And once that thread is pulled, that moment where truth and desire brush against each other, you can't unfeel it, you can't unseen it, you can't undo it. The truth. I still live in that kitchen, in that split-second con between the brush of a hand and the creak of a stair. I still hear the door slam. I still feel the silence in this house, like a storm that never ends. And I don't know how to move forward, because I didn't just break a rule. I shattered a version of myself I thought was unshakable, and no one tells you this. But sometimes the hardest part of a mistake isn't asking for forgiveness. It's facing the part of yourself you can no longer lie to. So if you're listening, if you've ever felt like your soul was starving, if you've ever reached for something just to feel alive, even when you knew it would leave a scar, let this be your mirror, your warning, your truth. 'Cause once some things are seen, they can never be unseen. And once a part of you wakes up, it never really goes back to sleep. Studio microphone Nara, so tread carefully, not just with others, but with yourself, because the heart may forget, but the soul remembers. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next videos.